should go and get started. I think Jose is here, so we should have a quorum. So, sorry, I have a cat on my notes, on my agenda here. So I call this meeting to order of the Riders Advisory Council for the May 3rd, 2023. I guess, John, do you do the roll call first?
Sure.
Okay.
Mike Leibowitz
Here.
here. Mahalia Fernando, out of town. Cole Stout, not quite yet. Jose Del Cid,
Here.
here. Brian Meyer,
Here.
Pat Sheehan,
Here.
Emma Wormser. Okay, not here yet. You still have 4 of 7. That's a quorum. So
Thank you very much, John. The first thing I want to do is, vote to approve the agenda. Do I have a second?
Jose, second.
All right, we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, all opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, the ayes have it, so the agenda is approved, and now we're going to move on to public comment. Is there anybody out there who is from the public and wants to speak to us? And if you're on Teams, you can raise your hand, or you can just speak in and just say you're here. John, do you see anybody on there?
I don't. I learned today that if you're on Teams on the phone and want to raise your hand, you can press *5.
I would never remember that even if I was on the phone, but all right, sounds like going once.
But if anybody,
going
but I don't see anybody.
Okay, hearing no public comments, we'll move on to Melissa Kim, the Better Bus Draft Visionary Network.
Actually, it is William Jones.
William, I apologize. I'm reading
That's on me.
We just approved that, but we look forward to hearing from you nonetheless. So thank you very much. And the floor is yours.
Good afternoon to the members of the Riders Advisory Council. On behalf of Melissa Kim and the project management team, along with Ms. Lisa Schooley, who's here, I want to thank you for the opportunity to share an update on the Better Bus network redesign. I will share my screen here shortly and share the presentation. Let me know if you can see the screen.
We can see it. Thank you.
Okay, so again, and good evening. So the purpose of this update is to provide you where we are in terms of the effort and provide some highlights from the Draft Visionary Network and upcoming public and other audience outreach efforts. And I would like to say that this is a draft. This is a draft visionary network, and we're going through the process of public feedback. So there is no implementation of what you will see or hear at this time. So it's still a draft, and we have a ways to go before we get to some level of a plan and strategy on how this would flesh out. So where we are now, we're currently in phase 2, public and stakeholder engagement. And we started that back on the week of the 17th. And we had one of our first workshops on April 21st, which is part of 5, one of 5 that we're doing. And there's a lot of additional events that are going on across the region. So I'll share more of that in just a moment. But some highlights from the Draft Visionary Network. This network is a network that we believe the region needs and deserves, and it seeks to deliver a few things: regional connectivity, which matches when and where people want to travel. It also seeks to deliver quality customer and operator experience by providing fast, frequent, and reliable service. And this network does have a heavy focus on equity, making sure that we address inequalities and increase access to opportunity for disenfranchised communities. And as you see on the right-hand side of the screen, this Draft Visionary Network could attract 40 to 45,000 additional weekday trips and 30 to 35,000 additional weekend trips. And then also with this, if we can have new residents and commuters take transit, particularly with the bus network, this draft visionary network could deliver a reduction of over 14,000 metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions a year. So, as I mentioned before, this draft visionary network is the bus network that the region needs. And some of the essentials that we're looking at is that non-commuter service should operate 7 days a week across the region. All service should operate as frequently as possible and not less than any 30 minutes. And that also, in terms of providing more service all day and throughout the week, a regional 24-hour network to befit the nation's capital is a part of this draft visionary network. In that, we're also looking at increasing cross-town and cross-county connections, connecting key destinations, including transit hubs and transit and rail stations with direct frequent routes, and also looking to extend service beyond jurisdictional boundaries or jurisdictional borders. And so some of the examples that we have here include um, a new connection that would run between New Carrollton, Addison, and Suitland stations, essentially extending the reach of the Purple Line with a frequent route that would be that's proposed within the Draft Visionary Network. Looking at connecting transit hubs that are not necessarily rail stations in the system, extending the service from Farragut Square in Georgetown through Arlington to Seven Corners Transit Center, which is the current 38B. We're also looking at creating additional connections to National Harbor, connections to the new Alexandria Inova Hospital Hub at the old Landmark Mall. And we're also looking at connecting adjacent neighborhoods across borders, looking at Fort Lincoln and Deanwood communities, as well as making a connection past Chevy Chase Circle on both sides instead of having services just in that Chevy Chase Circle, having a service that runs through Chevy Chase Circle along Connecticut Avenue, going from the district into Montgomery County, Maryland. So, in terms of how the Draft Visionary Network seeks to connect the region, by providing more access to higher frequency service to more people at more times of the day. The example that you're seeing on the screen on the right side is the existing service within wards 7 and 8 in a portion of the western end of Prince George's County, particularly along the Capitol Street, Central Avenue corridor, kind of being down the middle. So to give orientation, the lines that you see in red are existing routes that run 12 minutes or less, which is the frequent service network that was implemented back in September 2021. The dark blue represents service that runs between 12 and 20 minutes. The light blue is service that's operating between 20 to 30 minutes. And then it kind of looks like gray or like dark blue, more of a navy blue, is service that runs over 30 minutes. And what you see is the existing services that are within that community. However, as a part of the Draft Visionary Network, we seek to provide more service within those communities. And as you can see, there's a change in terms of the proposed network within that area with more service running 12 minutes or less, which what we're looking at is a 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. time frame throughout the day, 7 days a week, running service 12 minutes or less. And you also see services that were running once every 30 minutes to now run between the 12 to 20 and the 20 to 30 minute frequency. Again, looking at having service that runs 30 minutes or less throughout the region. Another example that we have on the right-hand side of the screen is looking at current Route B2 that runs from Mount Rainier to Anacostia through Capitol Hill. And as you notice there, this is one of the routes that we're looking at in terms of providing service to the residents and passengers where and when they need it. One of the things that I'll say and I'll get to the example in a second, is one of the things that we're hoping to do is to provide more access for service on Saturdays and Sundays. And this is really something that is focused and happening within Prince George's County, for example. But what we're looking to do is to provide access to an additional 123,000 and 208,000 residents on Saturdays and Sundays that would have bus service. And we're looking at potentially 1.1 million residents across the region having access to a 24-hour bus service. and then another 307,000 would have access to late night service running between 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. These improvements seek to provide greater access for residents of equity-focused communities. And approximately 99% of residents who currently have bus service will continue to have bus service under the visionary network across the region. So back to the example, as you see, the service currently runs between Anacostia Station and Mount Rainier, just crossing into Prince George's County. The proposed would be an actual extension of that route to West Hydesville Station to provide connections to retail and shopping access that's around the West Hydesville Station. And that would be with a high frequency all day, all week service. In terms of this network, we're also looking within the Draft Visionary Network to provide residents with access to an additional 13,000 jobs within 60 minutes by using transit in terms of providing those needed connections and to make the service more fast and reliable. Residents would have better access to grocery stores, especially on the weekends and at the midday hours during the weekday. And residents of equity focused communities, particularly in the district, will be able to access more K through 12 schools within 60 minutes on transit. And just a quick note, equity focused communities represent the areas that have the highest concentration of people of color, low income households, and or disabled residents in the region. The example on the right side of the screen shows Metrobus routes A6, A7, and A8. Those currently operate within Southeast DC between Anacostia Station and Livingston Road with some connections to Southern Avenue Station. But just nearby on the other side, there is the giant supermarket there at the Eastover Shopping Center. And so the idea is to be able to provide connections from Southeast DC to the shopping center as one of the examples where we're seeking to provide better access to grocery stores. So instead of a person getting off the bus at Southern Avenue and having to walk to the grocery store, this Draft Visionary Network seeks to provide that one seat access to the grocery store, but also, as you see here in the map, provide a one seat ride to job opportunities at National Harbor from Anacostia Station. So those are the some of the proposed ideas that we have as part of the Draft Visionary Network. Also, we're looking to make some of the trips faster, as I mentioned earlier on. And in that, we're looking at 10% more transit trips that could take 30 minutes or less with the Draft Visionary Network. And we're also seeing that as a part of the Draft Visionary Network. Again, 20% more trips in the region could be made conveniently by transit. And we hope that those improvements will save bus customers almost 20,000 hours every weekday. The example on the right side of the screen is the 10B that runs between Ballston, Mount Vernon Avenue, Old Town Alexandria, and ends at Hunting Point. Currently, that route operates through Shirlington Transit Center. And one of the things that we're looking at in proposing to make that trip a little bit faster and to provide additional connections to the Potomac Yard station area, where, of course, a lot of redevelopment is happening there, is actually to have that route operate using the Metroway bus lanes in Alexandria, serve Potomac Yard, and we're removing the deviation to Shirlington in order to speed the service up. There will be other services proposed within the network that would make the connection within Arlington to Shirlington. But we saw that this was an opportunity to pick a particular proposed route that could provide a quicker connection for those traveling through Arlington and Alexandria. This network also seeks to improve the customer experience by providing more service in dedicated and prioritized lanes. And as you see there, a lot of that is focused with some of the projects that we're doing with DDOT and with some of the other municipal providers that are looking at BRT corridors within their communities. And so by having more bus service operate on streets with bus priority, it helps us to make service faster and more reliable to ride and to operate. And we're looking at having an additional 84% service on Sundays, 64% more service on Saturdays, and 39% more on middays along those corridors where dedicated priority facilities are being implemented or proposed to be implemented as we go through this process. And we're just seeking to maximize our partner investments, the partner agency investments in bus priority infrastructure. So I have a little more to go, but I'm almost there to close this out. The Draft Visionary Network, some of the things we consider, of course, we've been receiving data and feedback from the public back as early as when we started this project in the summer. We had outreach October and November timeframe to hear from the public on what they felt was important to them as far as bus and what could make bus service better. We also have had feedback from the bus operators within Metro Bus. Also, I must make mention that this project does include our partners, City of Fairfax, Q, and Prince George's County, the bus. So we're redesigning their network along with Metro Bus, and also received partner input from our jurisdictions to form the Draft Visionary Network. In looking at this, implementing the network will require a 35% increase in funding for bus service in the region in order to meet some of the goals that I mentioned earlier, particularly the one where service would run 30 minutes or less across the region. That network does not yet specify an operator that will operate the service. And we have not yet specified stops or stopping patterns, such as limited stop services. Right now, we want to get feedback from the public on is the Draft Visionary Network and the proposed routes that are recommended within the network achieve helping them get where they need to go. So with that, and the way that we've done the network, there are temporary bus route numbers to accommodate the new routes and changes to existing routes. So as I mentioned earlier, we are in the midst of getting feedback from the public. And so how we are engaging the public, as you all may have heard, MetroBus celebrated a 50-year anniversary back in February. So we have been hosting 50 events in 50 days to celebrate 50 years of MetroBus. And we've been reaching out to a wide variety of customers in a variety of ways. We are doing surveys on board buses. We've had a few pop-ups that have taken place across the region already. We've actually had one webinar. We'll have another webinar tomorrow for Virginia and next Tuesday with the district. We'll be doing some interacting on social media. We are engaging with community-based organizations, and we'll be listening at community workshops. And we're also working with the youth and hearing from them in terms of what they feel is important about bus. And for those who can't make our events in person, all of the information to provide feedback and to engage the project is available online at wamata.com/betterbus. What we're calling this is the Better Bus Virtual Experience Lab, and it allows information to compare your current trip using the Visionary Network. We have a application that allows you to put in your information to see how would your trip change as part of the Visionary Network from what it is today. We also have opportunities where you can comment on your route on a route by route basis and to leave feedback through an interactive comment map. And there's also static information there where you can look at the profiles of the existing routes, and it has references to the current routes, the proposed routes with explanations and references to the existing routes that are being touched by the proposed route. And lastly, there are some upcoming opportunities. As I mentioned, we've had one of the 5 workshops, and the next one is coming up this Saturday in Hyattsville at the West Hyattsville Library, Saturday from 1:30 to 4:30 p.m. For those in Virginia, we'll have a workshop there next Wednesday from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. at Arlington's Central Library on North Quincy Street, just a little ways away from Boston Station. And the district will have one at the Turkey Thicket Recreation Center on Saturday, May 20th. And then the last one will also be in Maryland at the Creative Suitland Arts Center on Sunday, May 21st. And as I mentioned earlier, we do have the 2 webinars that we call Lunch and Learn webinars, and one is tomorrow. And then the next one will be for the district next Tuesday. Both times are slated to begin at noon. So feel free to join us there as well. I will stop there and I will take any questions.
William, thank you so much for that presentation. I found it very comprehensive, and it was really good. I think that you guys, personally, I think you're all on the right track. And I look forward to hearing what other people say about that and where you go from there. So I'd like to open up the floor. Anybody on the rack want to raise your hand to, yeah, Jose, go ahead.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Yeah, and thank you, William. This was a very informative presentation. I know a lot of work had gone in just, trying to get to this point, and I'm happy that you mentioned at the get-go of your presentation, this is far from final, this is draft. It's even like, as a nerd myself, when it went online, I was like, hey, what's going on with my route? I was like, wait, no, this is preliminary. This like breathe. So I just have a couple comments as a bus rider. I commute from Fairfax County into the city. And one of the things I noticed, and at least with the draft version, is at least some consolidation. I don't know what the route number is, to be honest, that is on the visual lab, but it ends up just going from George Mason University just to the King Street Metro. And there used to be two routes, at least on that line, that would go from Vienna Metro to King Street and then George Mason. And I can see the pros, but I also understand that people want to get to the metro in many ways and connect different routes, especially if they're going to parts west in Fairfax County. And maybe this is tied to that. I'll get to my question, but maybe this is tied to that point that you mentioned, collaborating with just jurisdictions as well. I'm guessing as you guys are going through the process, you guys are having check-in points with Fairfax County and other jurisdictions that there are no gaps, or whether there's going to be some tough decisions that WMATA is going to make and where Fairfax County is going to pick up. And I would imagine the same thing with Arlington, like you mentioned with that 10B route from the Shirlington Transit Station. It's a pretty, I can just tell, like, having better service around that corridor maybe at the expense of having something picked up from Arlington or the Shirlington. So could you talk a little bit more about some of the other things that you guys put in? There's a lot of variables here. It's a lot to digest in just a short presentation, but interested to know more.
Okay, and I'll try to be brief as possible. So what I will say is that December, January, and February, we actually had two series of workshops with our planning cohorts um, with throughout the region. So that includes Fairfax County, includes Arlington County. Arlington County is currently going through their transit strategic plan, and they're looking at their network as well based upon what we're doing. So it's supposed to be kind of a married thing, even though it's not Metro's consultants actually doing the work for Arlington, but the consultants are working hand in hand. Fairfax County is a little bit further ahead in their transit strategic plan. And so there are things that we're going to be working out with them as well about the service from Little River Turnpike to Vienna, as well as services running through Shirlington. We really want to get the public feedback on that because that's some of the trade-offs that we're looking at. In order to provide faster service, in order to provide more service in certain places that the region need, we want to see what's feasible because there are going to be other services that run through those 2 points. City of Fairfax Q. We're looking at their service as well. So there is that connection to Vienna that's still going to be there. So the questions are these are things that the public want to see? And we want to take that feedback and actually blend it back in to what we have going on in the next phase in Fairfax County, Arlington County, Montgomery County, which I must mention, they're doing what's called Ride on Reimagine, and their study is actually on a longer time frame than ours. So as we get feedback for that particular one, that feedback actually will go into their study because they have a longer timeline. With Fairfax and Arlington and Alexandria, the hope is that we'll be able to get them back in a room. They'll understand what the comments are, and then we can work together to figure out as we move this process forward how best to serve the commuters and the residents as a whole. And then from there, Some services will set up where we will run certain services, corridors, regional corridors between the municipalities, and then because of my prior experience in Arlington, they'll be looking to fill in the gaps. May not be the same in other places, but that's something that we're looking to do.
Well, I'm happy you're with WMATA and working on this collectively with all these neighboring jurisdictions. Just the one quick question, and maybe this is just some of the feedback that you heard in this early engagement. I saw a possible late night service along at least the Route 7 from Arlington all the way up to Dulles. Was that kind of some of the feedback that you're hearing? I know the Silver Line goes out there, but it's not 24 hours. Was that some of the feedback you were hearing from some of the metro riders or bus riders about having late night service going to Dulles Airport?
Yes, there's a little bit of that. We also have had some feedback from operation staff that have received feedback from passengers about that. And as we go through this process, we'll be also working with some of the external partners. George Mason is one of them. MY will be another one where we'll get that feedback. So there's a broader stakeholder group that we're meeting with to get feedback, and we hope to have those elements also incorporated in. And then when we get into the next phase of refining the network, we'll see how the 24-hour network can be refined.
Fascinating stuff. Well, thank you so much for the information. Yeah, and I hope to stay engaged as you guys keep moving on. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Patrick, go ahead.
I appreciate it. Thank you. I was very pleased to hear of the actually, the buses that will be coming into Prince George's County so we get a lot of comments, particularly from the disability community, on Prince George's County just losing more and more and more bus service. So I don't know if you can expand at all on other efforts within Prince George's County. And then two other things that I wanted to sort of bring up, and you can comment on all three. With respect to the, let's say the bus metrics that we see coming from your data people, how does what you're presenting sort of, I assume it's answering some of these questions going forward. And then lastly, sort of on the downer side, I think you said it was, I forget how much more expensive this would be. Was it 30? I forget it was 35 million or something along that. There are a lot of numbers. But we've got a financial cliff coming up in the next year. So paying for all this extra service, which I love, seems like it could also be a tall order. And maybe you could comment on all those three things for me. I'd appreciate it. But very excellent presentation, very comprehensive. I hope we get it. Thank you.
Thank you. And so in response to that, the first one, some of the other things that we're doing. So for Prince George's County, their entire bus network, regardless if it's Prince George's County services or Metro buses, are being redesigned as a part of this effort. So we're working with the county's transit team to do this. The county is also doing a transit vision initiative that's looking at a broader long-term goal of how transit will function within the county. So we're supporting that effort as well. The network redesign for Better Bus Network redesign is one part of Metro's Better Bus initiative that has other activities looking at bus priority, looking at zero emission vehicles and those sorts of things. The county's, Prince George's County's Transit Vision Initiative is a similar thing. They have other aspects that they're looking at as well as a part of this effort. So Metro is supporting them in that way. In terms of data, we are looking at a lot of data, not just the data that's reported in the annual line performance report, but we also looked at travel behavior throughout the region. We were able to obtain data that looks at total trips, regardless if you're driving or walking or taking transit. And we looked at a lot of different ideas or concepts. For example, there were places in the region where there were opportunities where we can make transit trip connections that don't exist today or did exist some years ago and didn't come back. One example would be looking at a proposed recommendation that runs from Tysons to Bethesda across the American Legion Bridge. There are also some other efforts that are taking place, particularly when Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation, DRPT, is looking at um, having services across the American Legion Bridge as well as the Woodrow Wilson Bridge. And while we run service from King Street Station to National Harbor across the Woodrow Wilson Bridge, there are some other ideas to extend the reach of services going across the river from Virginia to Maryland. So those are some of the things that some of the data that we've looked at that's kind of birthed out some of those recommendations. So we're looking at those things as well. In terms of the financial obligation, I did mention in the presentation that to implement the visionary network as a whole, it would be an increase of 35% more resources than what we're currently funded now to provide Metrobus, Prince George's County, the bus, and Fairfax as a Fairfax, City of Fairfax, I should say. It is above what the region currently uses in terms of funding for bus service. So understanding that there are challenges ahead with the fiscal year 2025 budget, those things are being taken into account as a broader discussion within the organization. From this project's effort, our hope and our goal is to be able to obtain the feedback during this phase to support those discussions that will happen by Metro leadership in terms of looking at funding moving forward and how to make that happen. The other thing is we're not at the place yet to say that when we seek to roll this out sometime in calendar year 2024 or calendar year 2025, that it's going to be rolled out in pieces or in whole. We have not we're nowhere near answering those questions. So as the discussions around funding for transit in the region continue, this team will continue to work in concert with that. And as we receive direction from senior leadership, we'll use that information to better coordinate how we move forward and how we can look at implementing this network. So I hope that helps answer your question.
Thank you very much. Good answers. Appreciate it.
All right, Cole.
Thank you. I just have a quick question about if this, with the Visionary Network, do you happen to have the stat on how many more people would be brought into, how many more residents would be brought into like within a quarter mile of the frequent service, like the 12 minutes or less? Is that something you guys have available?
Yes, actually, and it was in one of the slides that
Right, yeah.
I shared earlier. So,
Sorry, I was joined a little bit
so
late, so I did miss
no
that.
problem. So in
Apologies.
terms of the services that will run 12 minutes or less, with the Draft Visionary Network and the proposed service recommendations that are within the network, it would be about an additional 60% more residents in the region would have access to that network. And then 73% more would be on Saturdays and 64% more on Sundays. I don't actually have the actual numbers, but I can pass that along if that is of note. But we do know that it would be those additional percentages of residents would have access, and that is looking at 1/4 of a mile surrounding those corridors where the 12-minute or less service would be proposed to be implemented.
Awesome. Thank you. I'd love to see the actual numbers of how many are within that quarter mile now and how many would be.
Brian.
Oh, thank you. I took my hand down.
Okay.
I have some questions, but I think the questions are a little bit more specific. So I think I'll just go to the event on the 10th at the library. So thanks so much.
I will see you there.
See, Patrick, your hand is up. Is that just from before, or do you have another question? Just wanted to make sure we don't miss anything from you. Okay, I think he's good. William, thank you so much for your presentation and for answering all of our questions. I had a bunch of questions I wrote down, and I think mainly Jose had kind of, I don't know if we had the meeting of the minds in this one. He had a lot of the similar questions. I'm not going to repeat them. I will add that there's somebody I know that keeps coming up to me asking me about Shirlington, making sure that there's a bus from Shirlington to downtown or to anywhere, as she says. And I appreciate your conversation about the synergy with working with Fairfax Connector and that kind of thing. With the late night Dulles bus rides, certainly I think would maybe fill a gap. That's something that comes up a lot for late nights. And and another thing, just I don't know how much thought or like the Fort Belvoir and the Mark Center bus services, kind of more connectivity with those areas. But other than that, I really appreciate your everything, your time and your presentation. I think it's very comprehensive, and it's really it's great to see. Thank you.
Thank you. And if I may ask one other question, you said Shirlington to where? You said downtown?
The destination would be downtown. Yes, back and forth to downtown. I think the Shirlington transit area. And that's one just for people in my area that I talk to and about these things, kind of rent things off of. And then every day, a lady comes to my office and says, "Is there a bus from Shirlington to downtown?" So I told her I would bring it up, and I brought it up. So mission accomplished. But thank you very much. Anybody else has anything? Otherwise, I think on behalf of the RAC, I want to thank you, William, for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so now we'll move on to another favorite topic of ours, Lynn and the 8000 series update.
Thank you, Chairman Mike. I guess I should now say, right, as we go forward?
Mike is fine, but thank you very much.
We appreciate your leadership. So thank you for having me back. I feel like I'm a fixture now on your agenda, but I appreciate it. And I just want to first introduce Sushil Ramirez is back with us, our Chief Mechanical Officer, and I always appreciate him supporting us and wanting to hear from you all directly on some of these things. And Lisa Schooley was just on. I don't know if she dropped, but Lisa, you should know, is somebody whose teams are doing so much of the customer engagement and outreach, logistics and collateral materials and all the things related to both Better Bus and the 8K project and Yellow Line and opening the Potomac Yards. And it's just such a busy time, but I really appreciate the support that they give us as well. So I wanted to do really three things today, and that was to talk about our experience in New York, to share with you a concept that Sushil's team has for intercar barriers, because we've gotten a lot of questions about intercar barriers. And we're going to share that with the AAC as well, Mr. Sheehan, Mr. Chairman Sheehan, at your next event. And then to talk about the public engagement next steps that we have as we move towards the final design recommendations on the 8000 series railcar. So with that, let me start with Brian Meyer, who was so pleased to spend a very long day with, going up to New York and back, and we appreciate the commitment of time that he gave. We were all on the bus together from 7:30 in the morning to 7:30 at night. So just wanted to give Brian an opportunity to give his, thoughts to the group about the experience and what he saw and took away from that.
Thank you so much, Lynn. I appreciate you coming to us and talking about it. And I'm happy to talk about it because this seems like, obviously a very critical and important decision about not only just the aesthetic design, but the functionality of our 8K railcar series, which is going to be with us for a very long time. It was a great trip. Not only was it a lot of fun engaging with other members of the AAC, with staff, and with others in the community that have a vested interest in making sure that we get the design right for the 8K series. The rail cars we looked at had a lot of functionalities that we're really hoping we could incorporate not just the open gangways and the married pair. And I think that's one of the biggest changes we'll notice. But there are some other ones in terms of displays, you know, the layout of the seating that I think is going to be really interesting, that I think are going to make our rail cars more functional, more accessible for everyone. So I'm really looking forward to what kind of the final design, you know, we give to Hitachi and Hitachi delivers. And I know that there'll inherently be some hiccups, and we'll figure those out. But thank you so much, Lynn, for providing us that opportunity and for allowing us to go to New York and get a vision for what our system could be. It's obviously we're not just going to copy what New York is already doing or will do. That wasn't the intention of the trip, but it was to give us an idea of, you know, again, what are other metro systems doing, and how can we create a system that works for everyone. So
Yeah, thank you, Brian. And I really did think that the feeling that sort of getting to see that stuff in scale and 3D, right, is a little different than showing the drawings. And so maybe that piece of it was worth the effort just in and of itself, but also getting to see some things that New York has put on the R211s that, you know, we hadn't even really shared yet that we're thinking of doing. And so, you know, Shushil has confirmed for me, you know, those red and green lights, the LED lights in the door that everybody was so excited about that show you doors open, doors closing. Shushil has already programmed that in for the 8K design. So there are so many features, and I think, you know, we'll have some real pride in what we're doing, and I think it will stack up very favorably with what you saw in New York. So we look forward to sharing more of that. And you know, as you know, we were really studying the open gangway, what that looks and feels like when you go between two cars. And you know, it was so great to have Sandy with us. Patrick, she was, you know, literally outside of the cars, touching and feeling the intercar barriers, using her the low vision stick that she uses inside the gangway. It was just amazing. And of course, Thomas and Rico and others from the AAC were along. We had 7 members, and to have them be able to experience it using the wheelchair, using the walker, and get a sense of space was just really informative for us to see and hear that experience through their lenses was really informative for our team. So we really appreciate everybody's participation. And Brian, we had with us too we had the bicycle, the WABA bicycle advocacy group too. And I know you were sitting close to Kevin. I don't know if he gave you any feedback that was helpful.
Yeah, I think it was. And I'd have to say, I actually think his public comment at the board of directors meeting on Thursday was pretty comprehensive about, you know, having a designated space for things like luggage, bike, strollers, that I think would be very helpful and useful for our system. And I do have to say, I think reversing the ratio of seats in terms of the layout of the seats will just create more space. So things like that can exist, or it will be easier for someone coming in and out in a wheelchair, for example, just because there's going to be more space, more floor space. So,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it was great having him on the trip, because I don't really ride bikes, so it was good to hear that perspective.
Yeah, and I heard some of the comments earlier from board member Helfer and about trying to get other sort of rider advocates and customers involved in some of these conversations. And so I was really pleased that we were able to bring some different perspectives together for that trip, and hope to do some more of that. So thank you. I want to, John has his hand up. So John, are you getting ready to show a slide for me?
I am getting ready to show a slide for you. I didn't know if you also, I have a couple pictures from New York, if that would be helpful.
Oh,
or
sure. Let's share those.
I
Sure.
figure a
If people
picture
have
is worth
time,
it.
that would be great.
Yeah, let me just find, can you all see?
Yeah, so what was interesting about this was the decal they had on the floor for wheelchairs. So it was good to have the demarcation, but the comment that we got back from our AAC members was that the space wasn't big enough to accommodate a larger wheelchair. And so, you know, we're really looking hard at that to make sure that our demarcation is large enough for people to feel like the size of their chair is included.
Sorry, I'm just figuring out how to switch pictures here. Let me
Yeah.
see. There's another one of the, this shows Brian and the intercar barriers. If
Phew, my
folks wanna
bald shot,
see-
my bald spot is not showing there, so lucked out on that one.
Okay, good. I don't have one closer, but this shows folks what the open gangway looks like between the cars. And then let me see if I have any other good
This is
photos
Tina.
here.
While you're looking, John, those of us on phones can't see them. So if you could, I'd love to be able to have them if you could email them. Thank you, John.
Sure, or Tino, tonight's meeting will be up on YouTube, and so I can send you the link once it gets posted tomorrow.
Also,
Great, thank
I
you.
have some photos too. And why don't I do this? I'll send them to John and he can include them with the ones that he has and share them with the whole group.
And then this was just the last, this just shows the folding seat by the accessible area that Lynn had covered earlier.
Yeah, and just so you all know, folding seats are something that some customers have asked us to look at. We are reviewing them. I will tell you that the early look at that suggests that they may not be practical for our cars. And there's also some concern about, to be honest, you know, who gets the priority if that seat's down, right? And whether or not leaving that space for the wheelchair is the better call there. But we're still looking at it and we'll give you feedback on that soon. Any other pictures, John?
No, but let me try and find now the lovely diagram that you sent me.
Okay, so I'm going to let Shushil answer any really hard questions that you have on this, but you know, there's been some concern about the intercar barrier for both the 7Ks and new for the 8Ks. I don't know if you can make that bigger so they can see the other portion of that drawing.
Yeah,
John?
let me shrink this down actually.
So what I'm most excited about is the feedback from Sandy and at the AAC was that there were a lot of concerns about the springs. That looks like giant coils or springs that go across the cars in New York. And she wasn't excited about that because she thought, you know, people touching those, grabbing those, there would be pinch points and some concerns there. You'll see that we don't have that that design here at all. What you see here on the right is when the intercar barriers are not in use. Obviously, they're folded up against the car. And then when they are in use, the arms come out and those railings are what you would connect to about waist high, maybe a little bit higher, as you had to move between the cars. Obviously, this is not what you would do if you had an open gangway, but if you had to exit in an emergency, for example, between the end with the door in the 8K instance, or in the 7K where there's no gangway, right? This would be the protective barrier that would prevent people who wouldn't have a sense of exactly where they are with respect to the sides and allow them to walk through safely. Shushil, do you want to add to my very pedestrian explanation of this? I may have caught him. May have caught him off guard there. Shushil, are you on? Or Dave?
Yeah, so this is, Lynn, this is the concept that we had discussed in one of the prior meetings with AAC. And this was actually the same type of design that was demoed back in 2019, I believe. Except now there's 4 straps to provide the barrier at the platform. The straps are the highest strap is approximately 40 inches off the platform. And the positive about this particular barrier design is that it's self-deploying, so it's always deployed actually, so it requires no operator intervention, and it does not utilize those large springs. So it has flat straps, and they will be high visibility fabric.
Any questions about?
any questions?
Yeah,
this?
this is Pat. I have a question. Thank you for taking my question, Lynn. So I've read a little bit about what Sandy, her impressions, and having been around the 7000 series, I think the part that I'm concerned about is being able to take that initial step from the platform, thinking that I'm taking the first step onto a car, and there is no car there.
So in other words, you're not at a door.
I'm not at a door, right?
Okay.
But the impression that I get as someone who has some usable vision and sees light, but not really focused on everything around me or whatever the situation might be, interpreting the light from inside the car as, as light between the cars, and that's where you get people who walk in between the cars, at least for those of us that have a little bit of usable vision, gets us into trouble. I guess the question would be, can I take one step off the platform, or do I hit that between car door barrier first? The other question would be, my cane usually is out in front of me. Not always, when I decide for whatever reason, I'm not using it properly. But I don't want to take that first step off the platform. I don't know if the between car barriers are going to stop me from doing that.
So the between car barriers will be flush with the side of the car, so you should not be able to take a step without hitting the barrier with your foot,
the fabric,
or
or the cane, really,
or the cane, correctly.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay.
So Pat, the first of the 4 straps is right there at the platform level where it's your foot. The second one is maybe,
hip,
mid shin, and the next one's just above the knee, and it works its way up to the waist on the 4.
Okay. Good. Okay. Yeah, because what we've seen also in the past is the first one at knee length is too low, too high for someone using a cane. Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah. Okay.
I mean, I think when we have maybe a sample of this, it would be helpful to show you the sample. But yeah, this is not too high, I don't think, to be of concern.
You're right. I mean, if it's ankle length, that's really what I'm almost. That's about perfect, because I might take that first step with my cane if I'm not using it properly, but I want to be able to hit something before I take that step off the platform. So when these cars, if we decide to go with these cars and we have the design done here, would we get a chance to look at the between car barriers before the cars are in production?
The first time, if I'm not mistaken, Dave, these would be used on the 7Ks as well. We would retrofit the 7Ks, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Oh.
In fact, they will first be
that's
deployed on the 7Ks.
Oh, that's beautiful. Okay, so you'll get an earful of. Oh, that's wonderful. When would they be done on the 7K? Tino, you're holding out on me. Tino, you didn't tell me this.
I'm not sure we told Tino.
Tino,
so we don't
knows
have
everything.
the final schedule yet for the completion. The drawing that's on the screen now, it shows the draft concept, and we're still working through some of the details of how to, for example, the actual design is going to be a little bit more contoured to the car body.
Okay,
so
gotcha.
So
beautiful.
Right. So once we finalize this, once we finalize the schedule, then we'll be able to provide some dates when the prototype pieces will be available, and then we can do a demonstration for the AAC.
Excellent. Oh, that would be great. So let Tino have the scoop, right?
We'll give it to him.
He was
Thank
talking
you.
seven. He was talking gangway cars before all of us. You know, we thought it was gone,
Yes.
and he obviously knew something we didn't know. And then, but the 7,000, that'd be a good scoop for Tino. And yeah, and I
Right.
knew that would be good. Yeah, we really would like to be able to come out and see that, because that's a concern. The other concern, that's great. That's great news. And then the other thing that I think Thomas was mentioning, you had poles by the doors, and he was afraid that there were going to be too many people lined up at the doors hanging onto those poles, as we kind of do now, and wheelchairs wouldn't be able to get in. So I I don't know, not having seen the inside of the car or anything like that, I don't know if there's going to be other poles that people can, hold on to as far as for balance in this
Yeah,
concern.
so we did spend some time on the New York car because it had a similar thing to our design where there's a center pole that's a grab bar to provide the additional grab bars. We spent some time with Thomas going around and around that pole to make sure. But yeah, with the addition of the seat configuration change, there's a much wider aisle to navigate, and that door pole should not pose an obstacle.
Okay.
But
And,
when
and
we
the-
get to the soft mock-up, when
yeah,
we get to the soft mock-up, we'll have a real sense of that.
okay. And the seat configuration change, was that more of the, what do we call them, bench seats, or more of
That's
the
right, horizontal. That's right,
more
more
more of the
horizontal. Mhm.
more of the bench seats then?
Right,
It's-
but
okay.
not, what did you, Brian, who called it a brick? I mean, it might have been Rico. The New York City seats are really bench seats. They're real benches.
Okay.
Yeah,
Compared to what we have even in the 7Ks, it's quite a startling difference. So yeah, I don't want to call them benches because I don't want you to think we're going that
Right.
far, but the horizontal seating.
Okay, it's not what I'm used to. Okay.
Yeah.
My last question, and I was totally confused with this, but so I think you'll be able to straighten me out. When we're looking at the 8,000 series now, we're talking about, let's see, 4 married pairs, basically.
Right, so that's,
for
we
an
call
eight-
that a quad. So it's two married pairs or 4 cars is a quad. So the open
Two
gangway
quads,
will only
right.
go through 2 cars at a time.
Right. Right. And then but you would have 2 AB, then another AB, then another AB, then another AB.
Correct.
Right. And so you wouldn't be marrying an AB pair with a 7,000 series or another car like that as part of that?
So Shushiel's been trying to get on. He's texting me. He's having technical problems. So if he can't answer this again, we'll have Dave do it. But I can't imagine a scenario where we're putting the 7s and the 8s together.
Right.
Shushiel, is there any scenario where you would imagine that?
So I can answer that, Lynn. There's, no,
His-
they're not
His mute is
compatible.
off. He's not being able to be heard for
It's
some
being
reason. I'm not
shy.
sure why.
Yes.
Go
Okay, so
ahead,
they're
Dave, I'm
they're
sorry.
not compatible, so they will not run together.
There you go.
Okay, good. That was a question Phil Posner had about interoperability between different cars. And I know we ran across that with the 3 and 4 and 5,000s, where sometimes the announcements wouldn't go through the different cars because we trying to match them all up. Yeah.
Right. I mean,
Okay.
the idea is to try to have, two generations in our fleet ultimately as these come in and replace the 2s and the 3s. So we'll have 6s for some period of time, and we'll have 7s and 8s, but we won't have the mixture that you see
Right.
today.
You wouldn't have the 2, 3s, and 4s if we even have any 2s left. Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. I'm good. Thank you. That
Brian has
answers
a
my
question.
questions.
Brian, do you want to jump in?
and Lynn, maybe you just answered it, so my apologies, and Pat, if I misunderstood. So will all of the 8K series be 2 quads?
Well, all
An
of the
AB,
insurers
AB,
be 2
AB,
quads.
AB, sorry, AA trains,
So
effectively.
they're married pairs, so you
So
could run
4
them,
married
you could
pairs.
theoretically, if you wanted to run a 6-car train, you could,
Okay,
okay? But you could also run 8. So the delivery schedule calls for them to come in 4 at a time. That's why we call them quads. But it's a little bit confusing because the open gangway is only between 2 cars. So they're really married pairs, not like this, they're really married pairs. So you could run a 6 or an 8. And given this situation that we've had for the last couple of years, there may be times when we would want to consider the option of a 6 if we needed it. Shushil did text me and wants you to know that in an emergency, if an 8K had to rescue a 7K, it could. So that interoperability question, if it wasn't about an emergency situation, you could do that, but not in standard passenger service, as Dave said.
Good.
Any other questions about the intercar barrier? Okay, so next up. Is your next meeting, the RAC or the AAC, is there a meeting in June that's before the 8th? Yes, great. So is it the 7th, John? Is that what you're telling me? Oh my gosh, it's the day before. Okay, so I will provide the materials to you all well in advance. But on June 8th, we'll be making our final design recommendation presentation publicly to the board. That's the current schedule if nothing changes. So what I would like to do with this group in the AAC is to go through the list of items that we have heard concerns about and just make sure that we've responded to every question and concern that we've had, okay? We've been keeping, we sort of have a tracker on it, and we'd like to get back to you with that. So, if that needs to happen in advance, with some paperwork so that we can just discuss on the 7th, we'll do that if that's acceptable to the group. Chair Mike, what do you think? Is that the way to go?
Yes, absolutely. I think that makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Okay. And then the other piece, just so you all know, is that hopefully we're going to get ready to announce it in the next week or so. But we're shooting for the week of May 22nd to stand up a pop-up in one of our transfer stations that will have samples as sort of a design studio. Videos, samples that you can touch and feel that come from Hitachi for our consideration for the 8Ks. And so we'd love for the members to come out and we'll get you the information, the details. I think we're going to try to be out in the station for 2 weeks. So you'll be able to come on, nights and weekends if that's your preference, and give us your feedback that way, as well as obviously we'll at this point open it to all customers.
And Lynn, were you going to come back to the AAC on, would that be the 5th?
So is that June 5th? Is that your meeting?
I think so. Sounds
Yes,
like the
if
first
you would
meeting
have,
in June.
if you would have us, Pat, that's when we'd like to do a
All right.
final review with you guys too.
Okay, I follow orders from Anu. She's the boss. So yeah,
Okay.
if it's okay with Anu,
This
it's
is-
fine with me. No, that's perfect. Yeah, that's
Okay.
perfect.
This is
Good.
This is Tino. We're scheduled according to a news agenda to have Lynn again with us this coming Monday at the
Oh, that's true.
Buswell Subcommittee.
Yes, of course.
That's awesome.
Good.
And then once
Yeah.
we do that final piece, just so everybody knows, the next step will be the soft mock-up, and I'll be able to tell you in June when that will come. And then when we have the soft mock-up, we'll invite you to go through that. And that's the point at which we're just doing little tweaks. If we don't like the wording on some emergency sign, we can still change it. But that's really the point at which we're doing tweaks. So this June decision is a big one. So really want to get in front of the group one more time.
Right. So do you want to do the final review, let's say at our bus rail committee or AAC, which is better for you, Lynn? Do you have a preference?
What are the dates of both? That might be the driver.
The 5th, well, of course, next week is going to be what, Tino? The
Bus Rail Committee, and that's the 8th, I think.
no,
Yes, the Bus Rail Committee is the 8th.
no. Next, wait a minute. Aren't your next what's today's date? Is it the 8th? Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the Bus Rail is the 8th, and in
May
June
8th,
the
okay.
AAC is the 5th.
AAC
And
is the
again,
5th.
the bus rail would be the 12th.
13th. Yeah.
That's for June.
Yeah. But you need something latest by the 5th, correct, Lynn?
That's right. So
Okay.
I think we should stick with the 5th.
Okay, that's fine. Whatever,
Sure.
whatever we can get you trying to work with your schedule. That's great. Okay,
Okay.
beautiful. Thanks.
All right. That's all I had today, but I really appreciate y'all having us back and spending the time on this. It's, as you said, it's, the fleet of the future, and it's going to be around for a long time. And so we want to make sure we get it right.
We really appreciate all the time and effort that you put in you and your team. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Have
Thank
you
you.
named the married pair? Are they going to be called George and Gracie or whatever?
We haven't, and I love that suggestion, actually.
Is that a
All
Star
Do you
Trek
know that
4
when
reference?
we went to New York, I said, where did R211 come from? Because their side of their car had 4,000 and something on it.
R2D2.
And
Yeah.
they said, yeah, well, that's kind of what I thought, Pat. They said it's the contract number. It's literally the procurement, the contract number that they have with Kawasaki. So I don't know how these things happen, but I like George and Gracie a whole lot better.
Okay. Yeah, that could work better than R2D2. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Thank you all again.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
All right, so now we're going to move on to upcoming events, and I think John, this is your chance to make a pitch for some stuff, right?
Sure. Yes, I just wanted to make sure 2 events upcoming, 2 big things. I say that as somebody who lives near Braddock Road. One, on Saturday, we will be doing a sneak preview of the Yellow Line improvements. I don't know if anybody's able to make it. I wanted to make one last pitch to take a train ride Saturday morning from L'Enfant back to L'Enfant through the under the river and over the river. But if nobody can make it, which it sounds like, I just want to make one last pitch before they close the registration. All right, hearing none. And then
Sorry,
also, I wanted to make sure that everybody on the rack has received a save the date email for the Potomac Yard grand opening. It may have gone into your spam, but May 19th. So a week and a half after a little over a week and a half after the Yellow Line comes back, we will formally open Potomac Yard. You're all invited. It'll be, I think, at 10 o'clock on the morning of Friday, May 19th. More details to come. But like I said, if you haven't seen a save the date email from us, please let me know or check your spam folder. And there further bulletins as events warrant as they sort of finalize the program.
All right, thank you very much, John. Appreciate it. Keep these invites coming, and I think hopefully when we get some more members of the RAC that kind of come on here, there's more pool of people that are available to represent the RAC and attend these meetings and events.
Our new GM likes events, so I think there will be a lot more of them in the future. So hopefully we can give you all a little bit more notice.
All right, sounds good. Thanks again, John. So we'll move on to the annual report committee update. So it goes back to me on this one. So again, first I want to just thank everybody who is involved in the annual report and compiling information, talking to people, AAC information that Pat gave us. It was really helpful. And we presented the annual report, our very first ever annual report to the board last week. And the report was actually covered by local media, including the Washington Post. And the RAC and our report was actually mentioned several times after we presented it to the board. It came up from the GM and some board members. So it definitely was received and it was of note. And so I think the report, what I think is that the report actually brought some added relevance to the RAC. It opened us up, it ingratiated us into the discussion, and it demonstrated to the public as well as to the board that we are the organization representing hundreds of thousands of riders, and we have things to say, or riders have things to say, and we are the conduit between the riders and the board. And I think the report was a good exercise in doing that. And I hope that we can continue it through the next year. Just some really quick points. I think we should continue to record our individual outreach efforts, as we move forward, and kind of keep those so we can kind of compile them for the report committee, the next one that'll be convened. And let's go. I know they're interviewing, Bryna and John are going to interview some new potential RAC members soon. So I hope to get more of them on board, and we can see who wants to contribute next to the report. That should make the next one even bigger and better and more comprehensive across the transit zone. And I think we also should time it so that the next one can weigh in on the fiscal year 25 budget and kind of get more into other things. But I think it was for the first time out with kind of the minimal amount of people we had available, the current construct of the RAC. I thought it went really well, and that it was good. So that's all I have on that. Does anybody have any questions or comments about the annual report to share with the group? Seeing or hearing none, I will count that as a win for the annual report committee, and we'll move on to a new section that we have. Like I asked John to add to the agenda, called outreach. So the main thing this is how I envision the RAC, for the next year at least, is kind of, again, congratulate and thank Brian for all of his leadership. So what I intend and envision is, as we get new members in the RAC, and not to discount all the current ones, because all of you guys are great and got us this far, and is that we want to kind of build on Brian's leadership and what we accomplished over the last couple of years. And we basically want the RAC to look at the big picture issues, like the budget issues and things like that, and also the issues that aren't groundbreaking but make riders' commutes and rides a little easier. So the big and the small, and represent the riders fairly based on their input, so that we can cultivate solutions. So because again, the primary mission through our bylaws is to speak to riders to help us come up with solutions to issues and identify issues. So again, we should record our outreach and also use our outreach from across the transit zone to get it's not just for a report, it's just for us to get a feel for what's going on the trains and the buses and in Metro Access. And so we can identify any trends or common issues. It's kind of like the canary in the coal mine thing, that, before they really kind of become bigger issues, we can identify them. And then we can come up with potential solutions and bring them to the board. I envision it on a monthly basis. So this is our time. And I want to keep our meetings, if we can, John, to not super long and packed, so that we can have time to discuss what all the RAC members are hearing from riders or observing themselves, so that we can identify these issues, and then we can talk about potential solutions, because nobody's going to report these to the board except for us. And so I think that's our kind of our duty, and I think our big mission is to do that. So I do have to start it off, this discussion, and don't feel like you need to start weighing in now, since it's the first one on this. Mahalia had a message to some of us. I don't know if it was sent to everybody. I'm just going to read it off really quick. But she wanted to let us know, and this is a positive actually. And again, it's not always going to be doom and gloom. There are going to be positives that we want to convey to the board as well, to let them and staff know that things are going right. So Mahalia said a few friends and neighbors have mentioned they've noticed fewer fare evasion incidents in metro stations, although it still happens, but noticeably more people are paying. And she's noticed that as well in recent trips on the green, orange, and red lines. Mahalia also adds that it could be an effect signage or enforcement. She's curious to see if Metro has numbers to confirm this. A neighbor of hers also reported having witnessed a Metro employee stop someone outside College Park Station after they jumped the gate, and I guess there was a respectful interaction. And how we kind of envision it, they sent the person back to pay, no issues, everybody was good. Mahalia also said that there are concerns about bus fare evasion still being rampant. So that's a good positive we can take to the board to say that, this is what riders are reporting to us. But taking that as well is, I have a question based on what Mahalia had told us and reported back to us is how do we address fare evasion on buses? Because we have these kind of saloon doors in the trains, and the train issue, hopping the gates has been well publicized and talked about. But what about people just walking on the buses and not paying? Is there a remedy for that? Is there a potential solution for that in the works? I'd like to open that one up to discussion to the RAC to see if anybody has any thoughts or solutions. I see Jose has your hand up, so go ahead, Jose.
Maybe it's not a thought or solution, but I know that other jurisdictions like Alexandria with Dash allows boarding on both sides of the door. You can go towards the operator and I've actually been, I take Dash to get to Metro Bus, and usually the operator is pretty adamant when they start rear loading. They're like, hey, you got to come up to the front. So I think just one, maybe there's some people that take advantage of it, but two, maybe there's kind of like with the public campaign about with how to get MTPD's contact information, which I want to elevate, is well received. I saw someone scan that QR code behind a bus seat just yesterday. Maybe there's other ways that we can think creatively to kind of share that information to kind of discourage it in some ways, because we are elevating the metro itself, but not the bus. But I also understand that there's a lot of people that rely on the bus to get to work as well. So just wanted to add that point.
Great, that's helpful. Thank you. Anybody else have any want to weigh in on this? And obviously, you don't have to weigh in on it. We're just kind of throwing this out, but it's something we can always talk about, keeping the conversation open for the next time as well. But yeah, I think that's something that we can bring up to the board as just hey, what about fare evasion for the buses? And kind of yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I should have raised my hand. My apologies. I'll also say, John, I forget if it was a committee meeting or board of directors meeting that talked about fare evasion 2 or 3 months ago. And I think one of the stats was, I don't know if it was system wide or just rail specific, that about 13% of entrances or exits are unaccounted for. We still don't know how many of those are individuals that otherwise would still have free fare, right? And so I think also, I would also be curious, and maybe this is a fact-finding mission that staff does, I don't know, whether those numbers also apply to bus, and whether any of our outreach efforts to local school systems and universities have proven fruitful, and whether individuals who otherwise would have free access to our metro system, bus or rail, are actually remembering to use their card and taking that with them on the system. Hopefully it is, but I just don't know.
This is Tino. The Post liked the solution I sent by letter enough to publish it, and I'll circulate it to you all. My suggestion on how to deal with fare evasion on buses.
That would be awesome, Tino. Thank you so much. Definitely, if you can send that to John, he can pass it on to the rest of us. That would be really helpful. And thank you, Brian, as well.
So just to follow up on what Brian said, Brian, I think the 13% is rail fare evasion. I think the percentage is a little higher on Metro Bus. Also, one of the things that Metro will be rolling out, hopefully, if not at the start of this fiscal year, very shortly thereafter, is our low-income fare program, which will provide reduced fares for people who meet the eligibility for SNAP. So that may have some effect on folks who evade bus fare because they don't have the means to pay, by essentially chopping their fare in half.
Thank you, John. That's helpful as well. This is kind of, like I said, the discussions I think that we as the RAC continue, various topics like this to kind of hash through issues of concern that riders are bringing to us. This is perfect. Thank you. It's exactly how I envision it going. Anything else on the buses?
I was just saying, I pulled up a Washington Post article. It says 34% of Metrobus rides. I think it's just a lot harder to enforce. I mean, it's a lot harder to enforce because you have hundreds of buses, each independently out. It could be anywhere along the route, whereas at least Metro Rail, you have fixed stations and a lot fewer of them. And the entrance, you have to go through Fairgate to get onto Metro Rail, whereas the Metrobus you just walk on. And I don't know if there's I don't think that the investments you would have to make into the buses or to the enforcement, I mean, to do real enforcement like you're doing some metro stations is going to net that much positive back into the budget just because of the huge resources it would take to implement.
Yeah, but I think that's definitely understandable and something that it's kind of the catch-22 with this, I think. So yeah, thank you. Anything else on this? I did have another outreach one, but I think for the sake of time, I'm going to move my outreach one to the next meeting to spare everybody some minutes on that. And also in case nobody brings up anything next time, we have something to talk about. So unless there's any, want to bring up anything more about outreach, I'm ready to move on to our new business.
I think I just have one general question. I know that they're doing the Better Bus stuff. Is anyone in the RAC? I know Brian mentioned he was going to go to the Arlington one, the workshop session. Is there any other members of the RAC that are planning on going to them? I mean, I'm just curious, I guess.
I know I'm not able to go, but and I think this is the benefit of more. If we get the larger pool of RAC members, the more I think that we can. And if they're motivated and we can motivate them, then I think we can be running on all cylinders. Obviously, we're kind of stretched pretty thin, and
yeah,
we're all peers. So
I understand. It's just I know I attended the budget public hearings, and it was actually there's a lot of value added to going to these events. And I know we're a volunteer. We have day jobs, and stretched thin is I agree, but I think you can get a lot more interactions than just maybe someone that trying to get from A to B in the system. So
oh, you're absolutely right. I mean, just the FaceTime and meeting the people and being involved in the actual stuff is you can't compare with just showing up to these meetings and doing that. That's 100% accurate. So thank you. Okay, new business. I'll before I start with my list of things, does anybody have anything they want to bring up? Hearing and seeing none. I have a bunch of chicken scratch on there. I'll move quickly on this one, or not, I don't know. So I'll start with the easy one first, because the other ones kind of get a little more into the weeds. So one thing I have in my list of things is that I think that I noticed that the RAC got some pretty good coverage of their annual reports from the local media. I think we haven't seen in a while, good or bad, whatever, but I guess there's relevance and we're part of the conversation, kind of interjected ourselves into that. And I think that there's a need for us to be more available to riders beyond us just kind of talking to people on trains and buses. And I think almost like a targeted outreach of just advertising when our meetings are so that we can get people, if they're interested in attending these online meetings and providing information to us. I know a while back I had broached the subject of getting access to our really old Twitter account, for example. And I understand Twitter is not as reliable as it used to be, and there's kind of some problems with it. But just from social media part of it, I'm wondering if we should revisit at least getting access to Twitter, to the RAC page, so that we can say, hey, we're alive. Not so much as commenting back and forth with people, but to say, our annual report, you can read it here. Or, hey, our RAC meeting is on this date. Here's what we're going to discuss. Feel free to join us and weigh in. Like that kind of thing. I think that's important. And if we can't get access to that, if we can create more synergy with the staff to kind of promote our events And the things like our work product, because I anticipate us having more work product. Like the annual report's a perfect example of that, but also just really the meetings and the report. Because if we start getting engagement with writers and we can kind of promote our things, then we can do things like, instead of a regular meeting, we can have a town hall where maybe there's an issue that comes up, we can actually discuss it with the writers and have an open line, and like one of us can moderate it, and we can kind of figure out how that works. And we can either do it in person or a virtual town hall or both. So there's a lot of things we can do, but right now, our social media is in disarray. It's still and the problem is it's still there, but it's not. So it makes us look bad. And the web page, I think the 2 reports on there are from fiscal year 2018. I recommend. I know, John, you have a lot of duties and extra things to do, so these are just suggestions or asks, I guess, whenever you have time, to remove some of those old recommendations from 2018 and start fresh with now. So put the annual report up on that, and then any other work product, and maybe our monthly reports to the board moving forward, to kind of show that we are alive and kicking. So that's just kind of my spiel on that. So I guess the other ask is if we can get access to the controlled access, I would say, to whatever social media accounts are out there, and Brian has your hand up.
Yeah, so I mean, I'd just like to echo, I agree. I think we can and should and ought to partner with the communications team about using Metro Forward's social media accounts to advertise our meetings and our annual report and the work that we're doing. I guess I'm a little confused about the social media, because for some reason I thought that we had agreed to get rid of it. And I know we didn't get rid of it because they still exist, but
that's fine too. One or the other, I think, though. We can't, this limbo is not, it doesn't help anybody, I think. So maybe us as a RAC need to decide, do you want to use it? Do you want to just delete it?
Probably just delete it, right? Because there's no one following it. Well, there is a few people. I don't know about the Twitter one. I know Facebook, there's like maybe at best a couple hundred people.
Yeah,
and
do we kind of do a promotion like, hey, we're on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook for anybody that wants, and try to revive it? Or I'm with you. I think maybe the better thing is just to delete them or make them not visible to the public and reserve them in case we want to bring it back later. So yeah.
I will say I have access to the RAC Facebook account, and if anybody is interested, I can share that access. I do not know or have any idea how to access the Twitter account. So I don't know who would have the keys to that at this point.
So that might have been like a previous chair from several chairs ago.
It was probably 2 or 3 chairs ago, and I mean, I suppose there's got to be a way to either reactivate or get it deleted. I'm sure Twitter's customer service is awesome right now, but it's, if it's something that, having this vestigial Twitter account out there is doing more harm than good, then,
And you know what? We may have lost the blue check, John. So.
So I think in the short term, if we can look into that, or maybe we decide we want to create a new Twitter RAC account and just be like, hey, that guy, we don't know who that guy is, and start over. But I think with Brian, I think his suggestion is probably the most viable at this point. We can maybe type up what we want the communication, or suggest the communications people can put out, and ask them if they can do that for us, and then let them, and if they run with it, and that we can go. I have no problem with the communications people being for what the vision is for this. It's not like we're going to be, kind of going rogue or anything like that. So I think that's fine. So I guess the next step, John, if you can send us who our contact would be in the communication people, then we can maybe kind of get that ball rolling and get that started.
And Mike,
Yes.
Jose has a hand.
I have a hand. Mike, may I also suggest I want to also suggest you have a platform once a month. You can do a plug at the very end.
That is very true. Okay.
And it's on YouTube and people can re-see it and so forth. So it's just a suggestion, you have a
That is
platform
the
once a
most
month.
common sense, awesome suggestion that I totally did not even think of. So thank you so much. That's great.
And I will see, Mike, about the digital team. I know that we have a new customer experience and engagement officer chief customer experience and engagement officer who has started. I think Twitter falls into her wheelhouse. Unfortunately, all of the people that I know that were handling our social media accounts have decamped for Amtrak. But I can research and figure out where to go with that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Does anybody else have anything on this one? Otherwise, I'm going to move on to the last one. And we are going to get out before 8 o'clock because, again, as volunteers, everyone's busy. My personal policy is to not go longer than 2 hours for these meetings. We good with moving on to my other new business? This is one of my, how I envision us, the RAC operating, kind of the bigger picture part of it. So you probably have seen this. So basically our annual report, I think was spot on where we talked about, sorry, my camera's doing weird things. Our annual report, I think, was spot on regarding how 60% of the people we talked to, which is 60 out of 100, mentioned long-term health of the system as kind of their big issues. Sorry, my cat just knocked over a bunch of stuff. So the GM recently spoken out about how this fiscal cliff and how he believes that by next summer we can have these 30-minute wait times due to the $700 million budget shortfall. And I think we all can agree that if that would come to fruition, then that would pretty much kill the system. So what I would like to propose is that the RAC kind of weigh in on the bigger issue, not what the GM said as per se, but on the where we stand on this budget shortfall and what we think is the way to go. So I propose an open letter that we can write up and present to the board, advocating. And this is my idea. Feel free to tell me I'm a complete idiot, which is not the first time I would hear that. But I think we should advocate for something that I look at, a transit compact between the federal government, local jurisdictions, and Metro. And the basics for our vision would be, how we would, because again, we're essentially representing the riders, hundreds of thousands of people that take this. There's many of them who rely on the system. So we have a stake in this, and a stake in this. And I don't think we should be silent when all these other kind of dueling voices or are out there saying things, but I think we should speak up. And so the basics for the vision is that Metro would kind of, we think, at least I would think that Metro, additional funding would be contingent on Metro meeting numerous safety and transit benchmarks. And then we can hash through what those benchmarks, at least generally what they would be. And then for the federal government, I look at something like maybe like federal zones where it's an increase in federal transportation, or would advocate for increase in federal transportation funding to areas in the United States where there's a concentration of federal and military workers, with the idea being that the mass transit is necessary to get the government workers and the service members to these places. So obviously it benefits the federal government to better fund transit in these particular areas. And obviously DC would be the first to come to mind for having this, but an additional funding source for this, but better making this a national allocation because it recognizes that transit funding is not just a WMATA issue, but obviously the goal would be to, there's so many federal workers here that I think that additional federal, not killing the Metro system with not enough funding would benefit the federal government and its workforce. And again, I realize there's very generalities at this point, but I just want to get the ball rolling. And then the other thing would be local jurisdictions recommend, I guess funding, proportional funding from the local jurisdictions that service Metro. And one of them would be and I hate to say this one, but further increasing the the gas taxes in those regions, and potentially proposing a tax on ride-sharing apps, and maybe you can just limit the additional taxes on the ride-sharing apps to the cars that are actually just using gasoline. So I hate taxes and things like that. So the idea would be just, where can we do that? So that's just kind of where my head is at with us weighing in. I realize there might be different point of views, but I wanted to throw that out there and see what the RAC has to say, and whether you think that writing a letter proposing at least something and weighing in is something worth our time and will be beneficial.
Mike, I think I like a lot of the idea, like the actual ideas you said. However, I don't know if the RAC is the right venue, is the right body to do that. I think at the end of the day, we're a committee of the board, and the decisions that have to be made are policy decisions that if riders want, prefer certain policy decisions, they should make those. They have to make those directly to their jurisdictions, because all the jurisdictions, have the authority over funding and what those stipulations are. I really see the RAC role, in an impending, on the fiscal situation being, I think we feed to the board on what impacts would happen. I think so if you come to this, here's how the riders would feel about the XYZ trade-offs. And we focus more on the operational stuff, not so much on the policy decisions that come from the jurisdictions. I think that's kind of, the Metro board is appointed by jurisdictions for that reason, because it really, at the end of the day, is a political, not in a sense of like Republican Party, like a Democratic Party kind of political, but a smaller, like that's a political jurisdiction decision. And I don't think the RAC is the appropriate venue to make sort of policy recommendations to the jurisdictions. That's just kind of my thoughts on that. And I think there's a lot that should be done to redirect. Personally, think to get transit funding, because transit funding is better than highway funding, but I don't think the RAC is in a position to be making that sort of formal decision, since it is really a tax dollar kind of question that people who pay the taxes in certain jurisdictions get to make that decision.
Okay, so you think don't weigh in, not our lane.
I think so, and I think maybe when we do weigh in, it's to the board saying, if this budget shortfall happens, here are the trade-offs that, this is how the riders feel about what trade-offs need to be made, if those tough decisions have to be made. Then we help the board make those decisions on what services cut and where and what those impacts are. I think that's where the RAC's role is to the board.
And that conversation is probably premature to talk about trade-offs at this point, I would think.
Right. I think so. I think everyone, we can encourage people to make their voices heard to their representatives that make those decisions, but I don't think the board, since we are a subset of the board, we should have a role in that.
Okay. And in the annual report, we did mention in there that kind of like the rider apathy, if it gets worse, will affect in the bigger picture, because riders won't be so urgent to press their elected leaders to fund things because they don't care anymore. So no, I think that's helpful, and thank you. You have sold me on that one. Does anybody disagree with Cole or think that the first proposal is a good idea? Whatever. Anybody have any thoughts?
The only thing I'll add to Cole is, I think he hit it spot on. I just want us to make sure that we're staying within our scope as a RAC, because that is also important. I do see the concerns, especially since it's been talked about, but I think Cole was very spot on, so I agree. And I guess when the budget comes, that's we're going to be doing another annual report. We're going to probably, if that's going to be something that's going to come up from the annual report from talking to riders, we can definitely elevate that as within our scope. So
yeah. Okay, I think that Cole, thank you for your leadership and setting me straight. I agree with you. Anything else? Anybody? Otherwise, that was the only thing I had for new business. All right. So having nothing else on there, I move that we adjourn this meeting. Do I have a second?
Jose second.
Jose seconds. All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Anybody not want to adjourn? All right, I call this meeting adjourned. Thank you so much, everybody.
Good
Good night.
evening,
Well
everyone.
done.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.